Let's look at the concept of what it looks like to not choose yourself through love after lockup. But before we get into this, let's look at the psychological implications when people are in prison and when they come out of prison. So, I'm gathering some information through an accredited scholarly article through a university, so I will leave the link down below somehow. But to give you the gist, we have some idea that most inmates have a hard time incorporating themselves through the free world. So let's look at some psychological impacts. In this article, there were notions about overcrowding and the increased incarceration rates that impact the living conditions that they face in the realms of safety, poor prison management, and adequate programming so they could become successful once they get out of prison. And I'm pretty sure there are a few inmates that are not psychologically impacted, but for the majority, they definitely are. So, a point that this article talked about was the dependence on institutional structure and contingency. So, basically, when you're in prison, you're stripped away from day to day decisions. And when you're used to that, it's hard for you to make decisions once you get out of prison. I'm not saying for all, but for most. So you depend on these institutions and infrastructures to make decisions for you, as well as people. And due to the invocation of punishment, a lot of inmates don't know how to set limits for themselves. They know that they're always going to get checked if they do something. So having self discipline and making sure that you set limits for yourself could be a very hard task for them. Not all, but most. So, due to the nature of prison, inmates learn to watch their back, so to speak. And since there's no exit, they learn to be super aware of their surroundings because they know that if they slip up in any type of way, it's their ass, especially if it's a very volatile imprisonment establishment. And due to the conditions, inmates will try to dominate, take advantage, and establish status in order to survive. So, the motto is trust no one. And if you don't present a tough exterior, more than likely you won't survive in prison. Other points are emotional over control, alienation, social withdrawal, and isolation. So I feel like for most inmates, they want to establish some type of control within the dynamics within prison because it's a way for them to protect themselves. So having emotional, vulnerable conversations with people or those type of relationships can present a risk to them. Therefore, they're very, very careful what they say. So for some people, it might cause them to socially withdraw and isolate in order to protect themselves. Another is diminished sense of self-worth and personal value. So basically that basically means what it says. So when you're in prison, when you have your liberties taken away, when you don't know how you're going to end up once you get out of prison, it could definitely impact your self-esteem. I don't think anybody wants to be put in that position. So due to the social rules, unwritten rules of prison, and basically all the factors that I incorporated, it creates this sense of like PTSD that many inmates suffer from, which obviously leaks into other areas in their life if they don't take the time to actually work on their issues. So it makes sense as to why inmates seek interpersonal relationships with civilians in order to have some sense of security and some sense of fulfillment that they're not getting from their environment or from within themselves, which can result in not having the best